and he said, Dad, because he's got a little head congestion coming back from camp, and he's like, Dad, I've got a question, and I'm going to whisper it because I don't want God to hear. I'm like, well, God can hear you, but whatever. He goes, I'm not mad at God, but I just don't understand. If you pray not to get sick, why do we get sick? Is it like the sickness goes around God or something? I'm like, buddy, if I could answer that question, yeah, I was like, we just don't have answers to things. And what we have to do is trust God and know that His will is for us not to be sick and to be well. But we live in a fallen world, and of course, for a 6-year-old, that's hard to explain. But it just reminds me every time that that I pray that I'm not going to always see the answers that I want to see. But my job is just to remain steadfast. So, all right. Well, if you have your Bibles, turn to Genesis 34. Genesis 34. It's been, I guess, a month since we've been in here doing this. The last 2 weeks we've been going to camp, and then before that we had the picnic, and so it feels like forever ago that we were in Genesis. But we're going to pick up Genesis 34 and try to get through chapters 34 and 35 and some of 36. We probably actually won't read 36, but we'll get there tonight. So, all right. Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, had born to Jacob, went out to visit the women of the land. So we begin with verse 1, sounding very innocent. It reads as though Dinah, the only female, the only girl that we have a record of in Jacob's lineage, just wanted to go out and visit some of the surrounding women in the land and get to know them. Again, sounds innocent enough, but the reality is this was a very dangerous thing to do. In Jacob's day, they lived in Canaan, right? Remember that they had been given that land, but it had not fully become theirs yet. And so they were living among the Canaanites, and it was not safe for Dinah to go out, to be venturing out among these pagan people. The reality is this falls on Jacob. This is a moral failure for Jacob because as the father in that culture, his job was to maintain the protection of his daughter. As the patriarch, he was supposed to make sure that his family, his tribe was taken care of. And more so the daughter because she was the daughter, right? So we see already something being set up that's not going to be good. Dinah wants to go out, explore. Jacob shouldn't have let her go out, but he did. And we read in the very next verse what happens. So verse 2, when Shechem, son of Hamor, the Hivite, the ruler of the area, saw her, he took her and raped her. Again, this in the Canaanite culture was nothing new. Promiscuity among the people at this time and in that land was nothing new. Okay, they saw a woman that they thought was attractive traveling by herself, and they just took advantage of her. That was unfortunately common in that day and in that place. The reality is it was a very lawless society. The Canaanites were not very law-abiding. They were not very, obviously, righteous people. You know, they had their own gods, and they didn't have the same standard that Jacob had in that land. So we see now Dinah out. Jacob failed to take care of her. She gets raped by this man. And it says, his heart was drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. And Shechem said to his father Hamor, get me this girl as my wife. So even though he raped her, he actually cared for her. Now, what does it mean when we look at what he says, that he loved the young woman? Okay? It's probably not that he actually loved her, but he was lusting after her, right? He wanted to be with her, and it's unknown whether he had seen her before or this was the first time that they had met. But the reality is he obviously cared a little bit about her because had he not, he would have probably killed her. Again, that was kind of the cultural thing to do. The men took advantage of women and killed them and left them for dead, you know. He obviously cared enough about her to make sure she was, again, it's hard to even say that, but okay. And then he says, loved her and wanted to marry her. And then when Jacob heard this, that his daughter Dinah had been defiled, his sons were in the fields with their livestock. So he did nothing about it until they came home. So again, Jacob is not the best father, right? And we've seen Jacob's failures in the past. And so we continue to see his failures now. We continue to see God's faithfulness to Jacob and his heirs because God had made a covenant with him. But Jacob, you know, the two of us guys and women, like if your daughter came home and told you what had happened, what would we do? It says Jacob didn't do anything. He waited. He waited till his sons came home. So Jacob is just kind of nonchalant about this whole ordeal. Jacob, again, had heard his daughter had been defiled. The sons were out working. He didn't do anything till they came home. Then Shechem's father, Hamor, went out to talk to Jacob. Meanwhile, Jacob's sons had come in from the fields as soon as they had heard what had happened. So again, here come the brothers, and they're going to be upset, right? They were shocked and furious because Shechem had done such an outrageous thing in Israel by sleeping with Jacob's daughter, a thing that should not have been done. And I think we all would obviously agree to that. That is something that shouldn't have been done. Something of importance here is this is the first time, one of the first places that we see Israel referred to as a nation. Okay? If you saw that in verse 7, it said Shechem had done an outrageous thing in Israel. Again, Jacob's name, after he had wrestled with God at night, had been changed to Israel. And this is the first time now that we see Israel as the nation. And the name's going to be interchanged still. We're going to still read Jacob and we're going to read Israel. But again, we're referring to the same person. Dinah's brothers had every right to be upset. Again, this is something that shouldn't have happened. The reality is they obviously also had some responsibility. If their father, Jacob, was not going to take care of her, then one of the 12 brothers 11 brothers at the time, should have stepped into that role of taking care of sister and taking care of her. So the brothers also were not necessarily doing what they should have done. They failed in many ways as well. All of them went out to the field to work, which again is an honorable thing, but in the time that they were out in the field working, their sister had been walking out and, what had happened to her. Verse 8, but Hamor said to them, my son Shechem has his heart set on your daughter. Please give her to him as his wife. Intermarry with us and give us your daughters, and take our daughters for yourselves. You can settle among us. The land is open to you. Live in it, trade in it, and acquire property in it. Then Shechem said to Dinah's father and brothers, let me find favor in your eyes, and I will give you whatever you ask. Make the price for the bride and the gift, and I am to bring as great as you like, and I'll pay whatever you ask. Only give me the young woman as my wife. The bride price was to be given to the father. So again, we don't necessarily do that in our culture, in our day anymore. I've mentioned this before when I got engaged to Larissa. It's still very cultural in their setting in the village where she spent most of her life for the man, the husband, to pay a bride price. Larissa was worth at least one pig, so I owe the village at least a pig. I haven't paid that price yet, but one day maybe I'll do that. But that's kind of what happened. So the husband-to-be would come and say, let me, what is it going to cost to take your daughter? And the reason being is they were going to lose somebody, right? Dinah, she did a lot of things around the house, right? She was the housekeeper. She was, again, stereotypical, but this is just how it was in the day. She took care of the house matters. She cleaned, she cooked, she did all of that kind of stuff. And so they were going to be losing her. And so something had to be paid to make up for that loss. And so this was just a normal thing. And Shechem comes and says, what do you want? I will pay anything for her, right? This guy is head over heels for this girl. And then, what do the brothers do? Because their sister Dinah had been defiled, Jacob's sons replied deceitfully. Remember, Jacob's name means what? Deceit, deceitful one. So the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right? They spoke to Shechem and his father Hamor, and they said to them, we can't do such a thing. We cannot give our sister to a man who is not circumcised. That would be a disgrace to us. We will enter into an agreement with you that on one condition only, that you become like us by circumcising all your males. Then we will give you our daughters and take your daughters for ourselves. We'll settle among you and become one people with you. But if you will not agree to be circumcised, we'll take our sister and we will go. So they're trying to lure Shechem and the entire city, the entire tribe of Shechem, to become circumcised, right? When they're suggesting this to the people, they're not explaining why it's important to them. Notice, there's nothing that says God has told us, our God Yahweh has commanded us to do this, to set ourselves apart. There's nothing about that. They don't care, right? They're not asking these guys to get circumcised to become Jews, okay? They're asking them to be circumcised because they know what it's going to do to the male population. They're not explaining, again, why it's important to them. They're just saying, do it, right? They thought that would be a deterrent, okay? The brothers are like, guys, listen, Jacob, just hold on. We've got this. There's no way that this guy and his entire clan are going to do this. This is a deterrent. And we'll just take Dinah, we'll leave, and we'll just start over again, whatever. But it wasn't a deterrent. We read on in verse 18, their proposal seemed good to Hamor, the son, and his son Shechem. Idiots. Complete idiots, right? Like, the proposal seemed good. I don't know what they were thinking. The young man who was the most honored of all his father's family lost no time in doing what they said because he was delighted with Jacob's daughter. Again, this guy just obviously had some feelings for her, right? So Hamor and his son Shechem went to the gate of their city to speak to the men at the city. Again, we will read about this later on, but the city gate was where all the men went. So it didn't matter what city you were talking about in these days. The city gate was where the men went. It's kind of, I don't know, I guess Hardee's maybe here, Dairy Queen, McDonald's. I know growing up in Wilmore, there was a place where all the old men went and sat, right? And I used to go down with my grandfather, and it was just a wonderful place because I could be around a bunch of older gentlemen that taught me life lessons, a lot of things I needed to know and a lot of things I didn't need to know. But it was great. So this is what it was. And decisions were made at these city gates. The elders would be there and they'd all sit around, these old men that had nothing to do. And so they would come and sit at the city gate and discuss philosophy and make decisions. And so Hamor and Shechem come to the city gates and say, men, listen. These guys are going to be friendly to us. They said, I'm in verse 21. These men are friendly toward us, they said. Let them live in our land and trade in it. The land has plenty of room for them. We can marry their daughters, and they can marry our daughters, and they can marry ours. But the men will agree to live with us as one people only on the condition that our males be circumcised as they themselves are. Won't their livestock? So again, they're making this proposal, okay? How many of these old guys are actually going to jump up and say, sign me up, right? There's nothing in it for them. They're not getting married to Dinah. They're just going to have to go through this painful ritual as adult men and older men so that this guy can marry somebody. And again, crazy. So they try to, Shechem and his father try to butter them up some more and say, what did they say in verse 23? Won't their livestock their property and all their other animals become ours? So let us agree to their terms, and they will settle among us. Again, wealth may have been the motivating factor that it would have taken for those men in that city to actually be circumcised. And they realized that. Shechem and his father realized, we're not going to get all of these guys to get circumcised for nothing. So what we're going to do is we're going to butter them up and tell them about all the wealth that Jacob has. And if you recall from past conversations, Jacob did have a lot of wealth. Remember when he met Esau, and he had camels, and he had donkeys, and sheep, and gold, and silver, and people, and slaves. And so Jacob and Israel, the nation of Israel now, is very wealthy. And so the people here, Shechem is like, if we just get circumcised, we can have all that they have. And it sounds tempting to the guys at this point. So all the men who went out of the city gate agreed with Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male in the city was circumcised. It seems kind of dumb for all the men to get circumcised on the same day, right? It left the entire city vulnerable. The men of the town could not protect it anymore. And again, this is exactly what Jacob's sons wanted. They realized that there was going to be a time where the men of Shechem could not fight. And that's exactly what they were doing, setting a trap. Verse 25 says, 3 days later, while all of them were still in pain, I can only imagine, right? Like, that just, back in the days before medicine, and it just crazy to me. And the way they did it was cruel, right? I won't go into detail, but you used a flint stone and you went to town. And I can guarantee you, the Bible is full of all kinds of fun things, right? I love when I'm teaching this stuff in class, the kids are like, it's like, guys, it's in the Bible, and we're not going to get perverted about it, but this is what happened, right? But I can guarantee you that Jacob's sons were helping to circumcise the men to make sure it was done right. And I can guarantee you that they were not all too nice to these men. So they were in pain. 3 days later, they were still in pain. Two of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and attacked the unsuspecting city, killing every male. They put Hamor and his son Shechem to the sword and took Dinah from Shechem's house and left. The sons of Jacob came upon the dead bodies and looted the city where their sister had been defiled. They seized their flocks and herds and donkeys and everything else of theirs in the city and out in the fields. They carried off all the wealth and all their women and children, taking as plunder everything in the house. So the two sons of Israel go into the city. They utterly destroy every man that is there. We can assume that at least every child 13 and up, if not younger, had been circumcised, had been killed. So here comes Simeon and Levi. They come in while the guys can't fight, catch them off guard, kill every last one of them. And then they come and they plunder and take all of their stuff, right? Again, was that right? We don't know, right? Jacob seems to say no here in the next couple of verses. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me obnoxious to the Canaanites and Perizzites, the people living in this land. We are few in number, and if they join forces against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed." But they replied, "Should he have treated our sister like a prostitute?" So here Jacob is telling Simeon and Levi that they have brought possible trouble on the entire family. Right? Of course Shechem did what was morally wrong. He sinned. It was a failure on his part. It was a failure on Jacob's part. It was a failure on the brothers' parts. But they're upset, and they take revenge. And the question then becomes, does this warrant an entire city of people being killed, an entire city of men being killed and stealing all of their belongings? A lot of innocent people suffered because of the wrong action of one man. And that's kind of how it is today, isn't it? Right? one or two people just cause trouble for everybody. And these poor innocent guys, the Canaanites, the Perizzites and Shechem and his tribe, they got what they got. Shechem probably did deserve to die, but did all the males deserve to die? James 1:19-20 says, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be what? Quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." I have to remind myself of that often, right? Quick to listen. Yeah, he gave us two ears to listen, right? One mouth to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. See, the brothers had a right to be mad. They had every right to want to defend their sister's honor. But they weren't slow to act. Had they stepped back for a moment, thought about it, this may not have occurred. Now, God used this in a wonderful, powerful way, and we're going to read about it, but what this did was it actually grew Jacob's inheritance, right? Because he has all these women from the tribe, he has all the sheep and herds that Shechem had, and so again, God is blessing Jacob and Israel, the nation of Israel, despite them doing some pretty rotten things, okay? And we've seen that again in the past, where Jacob will do something. Jacob has done something. Go all the way back to Abraham. Remember, Abraham lied to the Pharaoh in Egypt about Sarah, his wife, and told him his sister, and what happened. Pharaoh kicked him out and said, or the ruler kicked him out and said, take her, I don't want anything to do with her, and take all of this stuff with you. And so God continues to bless these people that he's made a covenant with through their bad choices. All right. Now, Genesis 35. Then God said to Jacob, "Go up to Bethel and settle there, and build an altar there to God, who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esau." So Jacob said to his household and all who were with him, "Get rid of the foreign gods that you have with you, and purify yourselves and change your clothes." It's interesting that some of Jacob's family had what? Foreign gods. Now, there's a little bit of a question as to whether these were actual foreign gods that they were worshiping, or if these were referring to foreign gods that they had just plundered from the city, right? But it's assumed that some of Israel's family, some of Jacob's family, probably were still dabbling in the pagan culture, right? You can take the person out of the pagan culture, but you can't always take the pagan out of the culture or the person, right? And that's important for us to remember too, because when God has called us and called us to be set apart, we're to leave everything behind. We're to get rid of that stuff. And so often we carry our baggage with us. We carry our we wouldn't call them gods, but we carry our gods with us into our relationship with Christ. And Jacob is saying, guys, we're leaving here. We're gonna go up to Bethel, which means house of God. We're going to go up there, but we can't take anything with us. We can't take these foreign gods with us. So you're going to have to leave them here. And in verse 3 it says, Then come, let us go up to Bethel, where I will build an altar to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and who has been with me wherever I have gone." Jacob, this is interesting, what Jacob says. He says that God answered him in his distress and had been with him everywhere he had gone. If you remember the last time or the time before when we met, this was a thing, this was not all that, this was a new thought for Jacob. It was at Bethel that Jacob realized for the first time that God was with him at all times, right? He couldn't see God's hand, his providential hand on him through everything until he got to Bethel, wrestled with God, and realized, wow, God has been with me all the time. When I fled from my brother Esau, and those, 14, 20 some years that I was in trying to get my wife, and ended up getting the sister, Leah and Rachel, and then their servants. Jacob wasn't always aware of God's presence, but God's presence was with him, and he finally realized that as he was on his way back to meet up with Esau. And so here he is, he's saying, we're going to go back to this place where God spoke to me, because I know he has been with me. So again, he's remembering that God is with him. And Jacob at this point is fairly old, and so he's thinking back to all that God has done. And obviously fresh in his mind is what just happened, right? The defilement of his only daughter, and then the murder of this whole tribe of people at the hands of his sons. And he's thinking that even in that, God has been there with him. Verse 4 says, so they gave Jacob all their foreign gods that they had and the rings in their ears, and Jacob buried them under the oak at Shechem. Then they set out, and the terror of God fell on all the towns around them, so that no one pursued them. Again, if you remember back to chapter 34, what was Jacob's concern? That I become obnoxious to the people around us, right? These people don't like me. These people now are going to be wanting to kill us because of what you all did to Shechem's tribe. And so Jacob is probably afraid. Jacob obviously is afraid to leave. He's afraid to be traveling through the land, through Canaan, to Bethel, because he's aware that word has gotten out. And now people are upset with Jacob, the nation of Israel. And so what we see here is that God does what? He puts terror in the hearts of all the towns that they're going to pass through. And that's an amazing thing. Jacob, again, buried all the foreign gods. He put away with them. And then God puts fear in the hearts of every little tribe that Jacob and his family are going to pass through. God knew what he was doing. God didn't have to do that. God could have, just let them travel through and happen what happened. But he didn't. He made everybody afraid of Jacob. No matter what crimes Simeon and Levi had committed, God showed them grace, right? God could have said, Simeon, Levi, guys, you took this a little too far. You need some punishment. But he didn't. He showed them grace. They didn't deserve it. They deserved to be attacked by the local people. It's a tribal warfare, but God was still blessing them. That's kind of how it is in Larissa's village. The parallels between where she grew up and what we're reading here are just so similar in many ways. They have this whole, you kill one of our pigs and we're going to kill one of your pigs and one of your kids, and then they're going to come back and we're going to kill a couple of kids and pigs, and it's just tit for tat, back and forth, and that's what should have happened. Had this not been in the Bible, had this been any other tribe that had killed another tribe, others would have come and attacked, and it would have just gone on like that, and it continued on. And that's the warfare that was taking place all around Jacob. And so again, Jacob had every right to be afraid, but God put terror into the hearts of those nations, those peoples that they would be traveling through. Then verse 6 says, Jacob and all the people with him came to Luz, that is Bethel, in the land of Canaan. And there he built an altar, and he called it the place El Bethel, because it was there that God revealed himself to him when he was fleeing from his brother. Now Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died and was buried under the oak outside Bethel, so it is named Elon Bakuth. Elon Bakuth just means oak of weeping. Again, Bethel, house of God. El, the big E-L. That is usually a prefix for Yahweh, right? God. So we see here that Jacob has now been, when he went back to Bethel, has now been reunited with Isaac and his family. And we know that because Deborah, this lady that we just read about, Rebekah's nurse, would have stayed with Isaac after Rebekah's death. Okay? So Isaac had stayed back, and Jacob had moved forward into the land of Canaan which is where we saw this story. And now he's going back. He goes through Bethel, and he finds out that his mom's nurse, Deborah, has died. And they bury her, and now all that's left in that family line is Isaac. Okay? So, verse 9, after Jacob returned from Padan Aram, God appeared to him again and blessed him. And God said to him, your name is Jacob, but you will no longer be called Jacob. Your name will be Israel. So he named him Israel. And again, this is now the second time that God has told Jacob, your name is no longer Jacob. Your name is Israel. And again, we see God doing this all through Scripture, where he changes names of people to signify a changed life, right? You've got Saul, who became Paul. You have Abram and Sarai, who became Abraham and Sarah. Now we have Jacob becoming Israel. What verse am I on? Okay, 11. And God said to him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and increase in number. A nation and a community of nations will come from you, and kings will be among your descendants. The land I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I also give to you, and I will give you the land to your descendants after you. Then God went up from him at that place where he had talked with him. And Jacob set up a stone pillar at that place where God had talked to him, and he poured out a drink offering on it, and he also placed oil on it. And Jacob called the place where he had talked to God, Bethel. And so we see that repeated. And again, what do we see God doing? God is now reiterating that covenant that he made to Abraham, his grandfather, Isaac, his father. Now Jacob gets that, right? You're going to be fruitful. You're going to increase in number. You're going to have a nation and a community of nations that come from you, right? And then he makes that promise to Jacob that he made to Abraham and Isaac that land will one day be your descendants' land. And again, that's why we, as Christians, should stand with the nation of Israel. This is not a 20th century thing. This is something that God, back in Genesis, ordained that this land was going to be set aside for Israel. All right? Verse 16, then they moved on from Bethel while they were still some distance from Ephrath. Rachel began to give birth and had great difficulty. And as she was having great difficulty in childbirth, the midwife said to her, don't despair, for you have another son. As she breathed her last, for she was dying, she named her son Ben-Oni, but his father named him Benjamin. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. Over her tomb, Jacob set a pillar, and to this day that pillar marks Rachel's tomb. Israel moved on again and pitched his tent beyond the Migdal Eder. And while Israel was living in that region, Reuben went and slept with his father's concubine Bilhah, and Israel heard it. So Rachel has her last child, and she names him Ben-Oni, which means son of my trouble, right? She's an old lady at this point, and she's giving birth, and so she says, this is Ben-Oni. But Jacob changes that name. And Jacob says, we're not going to call him Ben-Oni, and since he's the man of the family, he gets final say. And he says, we're naming him Benjamin, or son of my right hand. So Benjamin wraps up the children that Jacob's going to have. We see here also at the end of verse 22 that Reuben, the eldest son, whom should have received the inheritance of his father, slept with one of his father's concubines. Again, we talked about this before, how this family, it gives us hope today, right? Because they are a messed up family. They are so deceitful. They just go on killing sprees, and here we have Reuben sleeping with his father's concubine. I mean, these are not people that if we met on the streets today, we would think would be going to heaven, right? Let's just be honest. These are the kind of people that we would hesitate maybe to ask to come to church because of what they've done. All right? Now, these are not the people that are outstanding citizens in the community. These are people that have major, major flaws. And so Reuben Again, slept with his father's concubine. This was probably a way for Reuben to try to take over the control of the family. It wasn't uncommon, again, in the pagan culture in which they lived, for the oldest male not only to receive the inheritance, but to do something to prove to everyone else in the tribe that I am now the man. Okay? And we see this in the animal kingdom, don't we? We see lions, adult lions that fight each other, the males, and the strongest one comes out on top, and he rules the tribe, right? He rules the pack. And so this is kind of what Reuben's doing. He's like, I'm going to sleep with one of my dad's concubines and show that I am the man. He didn't need to do that. He already was going to receive the inheritance, but he did it anyway. And we don't read about it tonight, I don't think, but we're going to find out that what Reuben did actually costs him his inheritance. All right? So we see, again, this pattern of the firstborn not receiving the inheritance that should have been theirs. Again, and that gives us hope as Christians because God sees things totally different than the world sees them. Reuben should have received an inheritance, should have received the inheritance of his father. But that's not how it's going to work out because God doesn't want it that way. And he's going to use the situation where he sleeps with his father's concubine to be one of the reasons that he doesn't receive that inheritance. Then we read, Jacob had 12 sons. This is verse 22 or 23. The sons of Leah, Reuben, the firstborn of Jacob, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Rachel's servant Bilhah, Dan and Naphtali. The sons of Leah's servant Zilpah, Gad and Asher. These were the sons of Jacob who were born to him in Padan Aram. So we see here, we're not going to spend, well, let me finish reading. Jacob came home to his father Isaac in Mamre near Kerith Arba, that is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had stayed. Isaac lived 180 years. Then he breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people, old and full of years. And his sons, Esau and Jacob, buried him. And isn't it interesting? Remember, Jacob fled and had gone away for many, many years because he was afraid that Esau was going to attack him and kill him because he stole the birthright, right? He stole the inheritance. And then we saw the last time we met that Jacob met Esau. But then Jacob was afraid that Esau was not being fully truthful. And Esau says, come and live with us, Jacob. Come on, bring your family. You live with my family. We're going to just settle together. And what does Jacob do? Jacob tells his brother Esau, you go on ahead. And what does Jacob do? Jacob goes another way and goes away from his brother. But we see here Esau and Jacob reuniting again. One, not last time, but one more time, putting their father, Isaac, in the ground. Okay? Genesis 36, I'll be honest, it is the account of the family line of Esau, that is Edom. We are not going to read all of that. First off, it doesn't really offer a lot in terms of getting us to Christ. It's important because what you do, if you actually sit here and read some of those, you'll recognize some of the names that become tribes and nations later. Nations that actually hate and fight Israel, the nation of Israel. So we're not going to sit here and read all of those. Plus, you don't want me to try to murder the names because they're just odd names, many of them. But it's important to know that Esau is also named Edom. Okay? Edom, you may ring a bell to you. The Edomites, they were a line born out of the Canaanites. Because remember what Esau did. Esau, when Jacob went and married Rachel and Leah, that pleased Rebekah, that pleased Isaac. And Esau just went out and married Canaanite women, right? He thought that just getting married was going to make his father happy, and it wasn't. And God obviously didn't want that. God did not want anyone that was part of his line to marry these pagan women, and he did. So Esau becomes Edom. The last Edomite king that we actually know about, that we have any record of, was actually King Herod. The King Herod that was alive during Jesus's lifetime. And so after King Herod dies, we have no record of any more Edomites in the world. So that's very interesting. Again, I'm not going to read all those names. Another name that's interesting or of interest is in verse 12, though. Amalek, right? Is it verse 12? Yeah, Amalek. And if you remember, you probably have heard that name before. Amalek will come back to haunt Israel in the future. They become some of the harshest enemies of the nation of Israel. Let me see. Let's quickly, I think we can get through 37 maybe. All right. So, chapter 37. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks of his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and brought their father a bad report about them. We're getting some very interesting insight into who Joseph is. So we've got Abraham, Isaac, Jacob / Israel, and now Joseph. Okay, so if you're keeping track, that's kind of the line we're going down. We don't know exactly what he tells his father, but we're told that he brings a bad report to his dad. And there was another reason that his brothers didn't like him very much, and we know why. This is a very familiar story, but this was another reason that the brothers didn't like Joseph. Jacob at this point is, he's getting up there in age as well, and so the other brothers wouldn't have necessarily broken bad news to their father. How many of you, you don't want to bring a person down, right? And so they may have lied to their father about things, but here Joseph is just straight up and says, Dad, here's a bad report. And we don't know what it is, but the brothers are like, why would you do that? Why would you add stress to father, right? So they're already upset with Joseph, poor Joseph. He's 17 years old, okay? So he's not thinking with all his brain at this point. Verse 3, now Israel loved Joseph more than any of the other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he had made him an ornate robe. And when his brothers saw that his father loved him more than them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. The jealous hatred of his brothers was spurred on more by that robe. Maybe you have felt like that, like mom and dad like you more, right? But Jacob didn't hide the fact that he loved him more, right? He made him an ornate robe, a robe of many colors, coat of many colors, and gave it to him. So that was a constant reminder to the brothers, Jacob's other sons, Dad loves him more. And we hate this guy. And it says they don't even speak a kind word to him, right? I mean, my two youngest fight all the time. They get along fine for about 15 minutes, and then it's just fight all the time. But at the end of the day, they can still speak kind words to each other. But that's not the picture we see here. We see all the other brothers just hating Joseph. And we see what's starting to take place. We know that, again, Joseph was the favorite. We know Benjamin becomes the second favorite because he is actually the youngest in the family. And another reason that Jacob loved both of them was both Joseph and Benjamin were born of the love of his life, Rachel, right? He had the other 11 kids, and Dinah, the daughter, or 10 boys, but he really loved Rachel the most. And so these became his favorite kids. Verse 5 says, Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He just compounds the issues for himself. He said to them, listen to the dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field, when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. His brothers said to him, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Joseph, again, was in his stupid years. He was 17, and he was just not making the best decisions. I don't know if he was naive, or he just really wanted to rub it in, but he was not making some good decisions here. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. Listen, he said, I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me. When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? Will your mother and I bow, and your brothers actually come and bow down on the ground to you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. So Jacob at first rebukes him. He says, what are you talking about? Like, you think we're going to bow down to you? And of course we know he does eventually, but you think we're going to do that? And the brothers, of course, just hate him even more. But it says what? That Jacob kept the matter in mind. Right? Kind of like Mary pondering in her heart the things that the angel had told her about the Jesus, her son that was going to be born. And so Jacob, this is in his back of his head this whole time, what's going to happen. Dreams can be a way of God speaking to us. It's entirely possible if you have a dream that it's God speaking to you, right? Dreams shouldn't cause confusion. If they're causing confusion, they're probably not of God. The Lord's not going to confuse somebody on purpose. But if you have a dream that you wake up the next morning, you're like, wow, maybe that was God. Like, pray about it and see. Because God can speak through dreams. And so God was definitely speaking to Joseph in these dreams. Again, Joseph maybe would have been wise to keep his dreams to himself, but he spoke them out. And obviously God gave Joseph these dreams, and we know that because in the next couple of chapters we're going to see exactly what Joseph said taking place. Verse 12, now his brothers had gone out to graze their father's flock near Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, as you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them. Very well, he replied. So he said to him, go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me. Then he sent him from the valley of Hebron. And here we see a blunder on Jacob's part. So Jacob should have done what? Jacob, we know he messed up two chapters ago by not taking care of Dinah, his daughter. Jacob should have known better than to send the son that his brothers hate out into the field. He should have known something was going to happen to Joseph, right? But he didn't. Second part of 14, when Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, what are you looking for? And he replied, I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they're grazing their flocks? They have moved on from here, the man answered. I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. But they saw him from a distance, and before he could reach them, they plotted to kill him. We see the hearts of the brothers who are now murderous. Now their hatred has become murderous. It's one thing to be upset with somebody. It's another thing entirely to want to kill them, right? And that's why God looks at our hearts, right? You may not commit murder, but if you have hatred in your heart for your brother, you've committed murder. Apparently, Reuben's not here with them, and we find that out in a little bit. But Reuben, the oldest, who had slept with his father's concubine, is not around, and the other brothers are scheming to kill Joseph. Verse 19, here comes the dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams. When Reuben had heard this, so here he comes back, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him in the cistern here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and to take them back to his father. Reuben is secretly thinking that he would come back after they had thrown him in the cistern, and he would rescue him and take him back to his father, so he would become the hero. Reuben has something to prove at this point, and he needs to come back to the good graces of his father, since he did what he did last chapter. And so he's like, you guys don't kill him, just throw him in the cistern. And he had every intention of coming and taking him back home. Verse 23, when Joseph and his brothers came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him in the cistern. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, I mean, how callous do these guys have to be? They strip their brother, throw him in a cistern, an empty well, and then they're sitting down to eat. All right, they don't think a thing about it. As they sat there down for their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites. Ishmael, right? Should sound familiar. Coming from Gilead, their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay a hand on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." He and his brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came up, it's funny because it changes from Ishmaelites to now Midianites, came up, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites who took him to Egypt. We aren't told here that Joseph pled with his brothers, but we read about it in the end of chapter 42, when his brothers didn't recognize him, that he was in distress, right? The way it sounds is like they just lifted him up and sold him. He was crying. He was begging for them not to do this. He was in great distress. And again, think about this. These are people that God had made covenant with, and they were still capable of doing all of this. All right. When Reuben returned to the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't here. Where can I turn now?" Because again, he was the oldest, so he was responsible. He knew when he went back to his father Jacob that he was going to face the wrath. Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine to see if it's your son's." Man, they are just full of lies. He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. And all the sons and daughters came to comfort him. But he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will not continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. It was an incredibly cruel thing that they did, not just to Joseph, but to their father, right? They lied to their father. And they are sitting here watching their father mourn and grieve the loss of his favorite son. And instead of comforting him, instead of saying, "Dad, sorry, we lied, we actually sold him, he's not dead," they just let him just go on and on and on. These are not really good guys. And yet they're the nation of Israel, right? So we're going to stop there tonight. We will pick up in chapter 38 when we get back next week, or maybe the week after, since next week's camp meeting. So, let's pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for your word. I thank you for the truth, Father, and Lord, I'm just glad again that you use imperfect people. I'm glad that you give us examples and you give us vivid details of what happened, Father. It makes the Bible come to life, Father. It's not whitewashed. It's not painted over to be pretty, Father, but we see people just like us, Father, that you have chosen to use, Father. And I pray that you would go with us as we leave here, Father, and to remind us of that God, you love us. You have called each one of us as your sons and daughters, Father. Lord, help us to live lives worthy of that calling. Help us to walk out our life to please Christ in all that we say, do, and think, Father. So in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.